ReZero Starting Life in Another World Volume 22 with the totally just a normal human with nothing to hide, Shaula, on the cover. Besides the audacious dress code, which I have no doubt will garner some attention at the bookstore, I really like this cover for its details which may be missed by the reader while he looks at the other features of the character. I like the trio of red irises on Shaula's eyes. It gives her this inhuman, almost beastly look, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Her ponytail, which she calls a scorpion tail, is designed as such. You can see it better on the first page, and it also looks pretty cool. In the background, we see the great Pleiades Watchtower in all its glory, piercing the heavens, or should I say, stinging the heavens. And obviously, keeping with the theme of constellations in this book, we have the Scorpius constellation depicted on the background of the cover with the actual Shaula star on the left border. See, all of these cool details which I totally didn't Wikipedia just before this video while you were just stuck looking at Shaula's Milky Way. Now, to my surprise, volume 22 was much more peaceful than the previous volume, mostly because Subaru never reset. In fact, as far as I can recall, this is the first time, not counting with volumes 14 and 20, as those were not Subaru-centric anyway, that a character has a way worse time than Subaru, and the more ironic it is that it's Julius, the finest of knights, did not have the finest of times on volume 22. This volume used the Jaws approach of creating tension through anticipation. After a very gory volume 21, in what I think is probably the hottest start to an arc yet, we have this volume where I'm reading it constantly waiting for something to happen. Maybe Shaula will finally snap, someone will say or do something that makes her grow all violent, but that never did happen. And only when I was finally relaxed, this was such a pleasant read after that bloody previous volume. Sure, there was a lot of character development with Julius and a lot of psychological suffering, but overall it wasn't that bad. And then, bam, the author slaps me right on the last page with a big cliffhanger. Besides the spicy ending, volume 22 takes the role of the introductory volume of the arc as the world-building volume. Most of it is just dialogue, world-building and character exploration. The author does make a parallel between the trials in Arc 4 with the Pleiades trials in this arc, but to me these feel much less threatening. That's because of two reasons. First, the characters can do the trials as a group, so there's less this feeling of isolation and hopelessness like there was with Emilia and Subaru back in Arc 4. And secondly, because the characters are facing actual trials and not simply reliving their past traumas, although you could maybe argue that for Julius. I'm not really an astronomy nerd, so to me the first trial would have been a bit difficult even if I came from this world, but since Subaru was there and knew all about the stars, it still felt pretty easy. Only at the end of the second trial, where Reed reveals that it's an individual trial and everybody must get past him, did the trials actually start to seem challenging. And perhaps it was due to all of the world building and dialogue and easy trials up until that point that the book feels a bit uneventful up until the Reed fight. This is another one of those volumes where the reader's love for ReZero is really tested. If you don't like the lore and world building, then this volume is not really the one for you. Although I will say 22 books in, if you don't really like ReZero, man, you're something else. The trials being a parallel of Arc 4 do remind me of one of the problems in my opinion that Arc 4 had, which was the lack of focus. We had to clear the trials, to save the village, to go back to the mansion, to save the characters. It's like, what are we doing here? While I will say that Arc 6 story is much easier to follow than Arc 4 as it just has less moving pieces, to me ReZero is at its best when it has a clear objective. It's revealed that they are trapped in the tower, so they do have to clear the trials in order to be able to leave. But how are they going to save Anastasia and Ram and the mutated people back in Pristella? How do we get from point A to point B? It's the thing that I don't really see. This uncertainty also seems to seep into the narrative, as before in volume 21 everybody acted as a united group before they were separated, and here the characters are much more scattered, separating into different groups to do their own thing. I know that this is a nitpick and obviously we are still in the beginning of Arc 6, but to me, up until this point, it's not as compelling writing as Arc 5 was, as to me ReZero needs a clear challenge and Subaru is a protagonist that works best when things aren't going great. Subaru is not super charismatic, and although it's much better than in the earlier volumes, his dialogue can still be a bit cringy. The charm in Subaru's character is he is the ultimate underdog. He uses his own life to overcome these overwhelming odds, and these slower, more peaceful volumes don't really seem to suit him as a main character. I don't think overall this tone shift from the previous volume is a problem, as the author did need to introduce the tower, so obviously the first volume in the tower is going to have a lot of world building, so I'm hoping that things will spice up in the next volume. One thing we take for granted when consuming a visual medium like anime for example, and that it's often botched even there, is the spatial awareness of the viewer, or reader in this case. Do I know where the characters are? Do I understand the place where they are situated? If I was there in real life, would I be able to know where to go? So I really like the way they explain the Pleiades Tower, not just descriptively, but at a structural level, which makes it much easier for the reader to visualize it. I love these world building details, and honestly I get that this is a light novel, so I can't ask for much more, as we can't have descriptions like in Lord of the Rings, where the author just spends pages describing trees. To me, the best part of the tower is how detached from the real world it feels. With the healing room just being there as some sort of video game save point, and then they are surrounded by desert, and then they have a library where they can see the history of everybody that passed away. That was a trip. The tower perfectly embodies this place that should be out of reach and normal people aren't supposed to be there. As a side note, I really liked when the ex-librarian Beatrice started geeking out at all the books. That was a nice touch. And also, I didn't know that Julius was such a history buff. It makes sense with his character, and I see that he is slowly destroying his image of the suave character and growing into someone who has an actual personality and hobbies. Who would have guessed? From a lore standpoint, I really like the implications of the first trial. It's been confirmed that there are more people from other worlds than just Subaru and Al there. That is not new information. What I thought was very interesting is that the first trial is designed to only be beaten by someone from the other world. If we don't assume short-sightedness from Flugel in thinking that he's the only person from another world, then this brings up many interesting theories. Why was this designed to not be beaten by people from this world? What is being kept away in terms of information here? And who did he expect to come from another world to beat the tower? I would love for a Flugel flashback. If they could somehow, in the middle of the millions of books they have in that library, if they could find his book, now that would be cool. More than just his abilities or why the tower was built this way, I'm very interested in his motivations. What did he hope to achieve and why? I don't think Shaula will give us the answers we're looking for, so we've had the witch's tea party, how about whiskey time with the sage? Now that would be nice. Speaking of Shaula, she has been an interesting addition to the cast. She's as quirky as one would expect from someone who spent centuries in isolation. Her relationship with Subaru is very peculiar, and hear me out, this is just my personal opinion, but I don't think that she actually believes that Subaru is Flugel. The fact that Subaru can't override Shaula's previous commands and the fact that she is still hiding things from Subaru also supports this theory. I think she knows they're not the same person, but maybe because they have a very similar smell she just inherently trusts him. Perhaps in her twisted worldview it doesn't even matter. Maybe I'm completely wrong, who knows? I know you web novel readers are laughing at me right now, but for me, I guess I'll just find out if my theory is right or wrong in the next volumes. Shaula is not human, and unlike my first instinct, she's also not a spirit, also proven by the fact that she literally says this, and she's not really attracted to Julius either. But she is apparently fond of melee, so I went looking in her character design for horns, and I did not find any horns. I did find other things, but no horns. But my theory still stands, she may be a demon beast. It would make sense with the whole scorpion theme, and also the fact that I think she will sting Subaru eventually. I mean, come on, you can't have all of this teasing and then not have her turn on Subaru in at least one of the bad endings. It has to happen, right? Besides the tired trope of new female character is magically attracted to main protagonist, which, is a bit tiring, but whatever, I quite enjoyed Shaula. She really dances in the line between good and evil, and she's a very entertaining character. And now for our purple-haired history buff, Julius. I will admit, the idea of someone suffering way more than Subaru in a volume and that guy being Julius is a bit of karmic deliciousness. Subaru himself makes a parallel between him and Julius when he was also unable to let go of his pride and his own inadequacies way back in Volume 4. And here Subaru is more empathetic toward Julius than anyone was towards Subaru in that volume because number 1, he knows what it feels like, and number 2, Subaru isn't burdened by chivalry. As a side note about chivalry, I enjoyed the very small line that Julius had in dialogue with Subaru. If that had happened, Reinhardt would have taken the role of pummeling you in the training yard. This is very interesting, as we do get confirmation that if Subaru publicly humiliated the knights back on Volume 4, then somebody would have had to given him a public lesson, and I don't see things going any better for him if it was Reinhardt. Narratively speaking, and even in world, Julius is much more fit to play the role of the villain, but still it's very interesting to think what would happen to the story if Reinhardt took that role. Julius's parallels with Subaru are very strong in this volume, with him now feeling like the isolated character whose world is closing in on him. We've had Subaru suffer because of him not being able to say what he feels, being isolated, being distrusted, being in an unknown world to him. And now Subaru gets to relive that dynamic in third person through Julius. No one remembers Julius except the guy who he publicly humiliated. His name, his knighthood, everything that he prized is no longer his. The only thing he has left is his strength, and even that is taken away from him in this volume. The skill gap between him and Reed is not so much humbling, it's also painful. It's the final humiliation that completely invalidates Julius's character. He himself doesn't know who he is anymore. And as an extra sting, because the author is just so sadistic, Emilia beat Reed. Something that Julius could not do no matter how hard he tried, and while he was so preoccupied with his own problems, he didn't even notice that Anastasia was gone, something that Subaru noticed. The Julius character arc is fascinating. How the author managed to turn this pompous and strong character into a sympathetic underdog is just unbelievable. We saw hints of this in X4, which I think you should read if you haven't yet, as it really gives a lot of context to this volume. Volume 22 is the lowest point for Julius. He lost everything: his name, his family, his strength, and even Anastasia. The sword breaking was obviously very symbolic. It shows the complete destruction of this character who must now rebuild himself from the ground up, and me, I'm looking forward to see it. If you told me back in Arc 3 that Julius would be one of the most compelling characters going on right now, I would not have believed you. And on a semi-related note, I don't think this is happening, but I would love if Priscilla had a similar character arc. I don't want Priscilla to necessarily change her personality, as she's pretty entertaining, but I feel that she's like one of the only characters that hasn't been truly humbled yet, and I'm really looking forward to that moment. Speaking of characters changing, I also enjoy how Rum is now being written as a bit softer and more emotional. Not only because she now cares more about Subaru and Emilia, whether she admits it or not, but because even if she doesn't remember, she has lost a part of herself. And I love that she still keeps the tough girl facade every time. Even when distressed or worried, she still acts like the Rum we know and love. And she still acts like the blunt, pragmatic one, for example, being the only one to roast Julius's foolish actions, and she should. Every group needs a Rum. The ending of Volume 22 is honestly a great cliffhanger. Subaru losing his memories is a very intriguing plot point. And it also shows how evil the author truly is. Hey Julius, you're at your lowest point yet, right? Well, remember the only guy who remembers you? He doesn't anymore. Good luck, buddy. Volume 21 left me interested but didn't quite have a big hook for the next one. Volume 22 addresses that criticism. I am very intrigued to read what's coming next. I was even tempted to read the web novel. Tempted, just tempted. As a final note, I will say that Arc 6 is proving the value of Emilia. She's constantly keeping morale high and cheering people up even at their lowest points. She's not the strongest or smartest, but she's not a slacker in either area, and she's proving that through her own style of leadership she can be very effective. I maintain my criticism from previous volumes. I think Emilia's biggest problem is that she's often infantilized by the author. She's constantly being protected by everyone, so I'm really enjoying her contributions in Arc 6. I still think that Subaru, Meili, and especially Julius have way more interesting character arcs for Arc 6, but still I'm looking forward to see what the author is cooking for Emilia in this arc. After all, her supposed mother just got an interlude, so that's something. Overall, Volume 22 was a bit uneventful, but it did so much for world building and character development, especially on the Julius front, that I still greatly enjoyed it. You need these types of volumes in these long story arcs, and I think the obligatory lore dump was very entertaining in the way it was done in this volume. And you have so many interesting plot points like the tower, Subaru's amnesia, Julius, like where is this all going? There are so many story points to keep you hooked. And now for my totally serious MVP of Volume 22, it's the Green Room Spirit, for healing broken bodies, broken hearts, making free beds, and most importantly, being green. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. Volume 23 only comes out in a few months, so in the meantime, I'm thinking of purchasing the battle ballads in any way I can and covering those, and after which I plan to make some non-ReZero content which you may or may not like. So anyways, see you for the next video and bye bye.